Hey, truth seekers. Today we are being given headlines of where is Vladimir Putin. These headlines started on March 11th on other internet sites, but now we're seeing them in the very mainstream publications such as CNN. It is rumored that Putin has not been seen in public since March 5th, 3-5. And this narrative adds to the building narrative that started in the end of 2013, December 8th, 2013, curious date in history, when the protest started in Kyiv that began to the separation of Crimea from the Ukraine potentially to Russia. And ever since then, there's been more and more of this building war narrative that has even been fed by headlines such as plane crashes. Remember MH17? We'll get into that. So let's go back to December 8th, 2013. That's when this protest started, the tearing down of the statue of Lenin. It was December 8th, 1980. This is the date in history John Lennon of the Beatles was assassinated. He was assassinated December 8th, 1980. This destruction of Lenin's statue from the end of World War II came exactly 33 years later to the date. It would be 11 years after the assassination of Lenin that the Soviet Union would dissolve. There was no more USSR on December 8th, 1991. And 22 years from the dissolving of the USSR was this protest on the same date yet again, showing how repetitive the world powers are with their date numerology in their major events. In history, this is also the date Eisenhower gave his atoms for peace speech, December 8th, 1953. That statue of Lenin that was destroyed at the end of 2013, the same image was exactly 66 years old. It had been there since 47. Important numbers. Important numbers. The event, when they showed it on TV, it reminded me of the staged protest in Iraq where they pulled down the statue of Saddam Hussein and they made it look like Iraqi civilians had done this in the wake of the U.S. invading, but later it came out that it was our own government's propaganda. They had set up tanks and cranes and all sorts of stuff around this to make it look like it was some unique Iraqi moment. And back then, this is way back in the early 2000s, 2003, people were documenting how actors were showing up in different places for different military stories. So some people were really awake way back when, catching these same details that we now see in the Boston Marathon bombing, Sandy Hook shooting, Batman shooting, and so on. Actors playing parts. Look at this scene. I mean, if this guy got to the front of the protest, don't you think he'd be more animated than having his hands in his pockets? He doesn't look too thrilled to be there. How'd he get to the front? And, when they made this story, they didn't tell us that it was the anniversary of the Lenin assassination, but they taunted us with headlines like this. Ukrainian protesters play Lenin's Imagine. Live to riot, please. John Lennon himself is full of occult numerology. His name is John Winston Lennon. John has the gematria of 47, Lennon 74. Winston is 114, but with Pythagorean gematria it's 33. And he was taken to a place called Blackpool as a kid where he was taught his musical skills. Blackpool has a gematria of 33. I'm bringing this up because John Lennon is tied into this conspiracy. It's why he was murdered, supposedly, on such an important date. Obviously, this date has greater relevance. That's why we see the continued important events falling on it, especially pertaining to this region of the world. John Lennon himself was said to have been assassinated for being a blasphemy by saying he was more popular than Jesus. On Tupac's final album, he was referred to as Machiavelli. This name has a gematria of 74, just like Jesus and Cross. The Dawn, Illuminati, Dawn's a 33 word. So much occult numerology and symbolism coded right here. Shakur is also a 33 name, Tupac Shakur. On this album, there's a track called Blasphemy. It has a 33-second introduction with a demonic voice. My point is all this stuff links up. The same thing was done to Tupac, was done to John Lennon. You know? Same coding, all by the numbers. So anyway, back to Ukraine. They got an interim prime minister around all this fallout. His last name was Yatsenyuk, a name with 33 gematria. He was sworn in on February 27th, 2014. On his 147th day of being the interim prime minister, he announced he'd be resigning at a future date. No surprises there, right? No surprises there. All by the numbers. He would go to the United Nations in Belgium to sign away the fate of his country that he was the interim prime minister over. Crimea, where this whole fiasco became the focal point of, look at this. It was founded October 21st, 1921. And on this same date, exactly 77 years later, October 21st, 1998, it would get its constitution. Again, doing things by perfect numbers, 77 years apart. Here in America, the Washington, D.C. is on the 77th meridian, and we call it the American meridian. But here we are in another part of the world seeing this same number. Why? Because all these countries are under the same one world government ran by Masons. USA, United States of America, 311. USSR, United States of Soviet Russia. It's all so similar. Space program, nuclear weapons program, Cold War. Propaganda, propaganda, fear, fear, fear. All by the numbers. And just look at the colors, red, white, and blue. See this all over the world. Thailand has a red, white, and blue flag. Thailand's a 33 word. It was established on a date with 33 numerology. Over and over again. Yatsenyuk, the interim prime minister, announced his resignation shortly after the MH17 crashed in Ukraine. In Genesis 8:4, it talks about Noah's Ark coming to rest on the 17th day of the 7th month. This plane that crashed was the 84th Boeing 777 ever made. It first flew 17 years to the day of the crash. And this is Genesis 8:4 talking about these same numbers. Boeing equals 113 in Jewish gematria. Familiar number, located on the 47th parallel in Seattle. And here its plain numerology is corresponding perfectly with the Bible. If you think this is coincidence, you're not thinking. This is the work of madmen. Hoaxers. Hoaxers by the numbers, by the dates. So again, everything happening in Russia, Ukraine, Crimea, the United States, it's all by the numbers. On March 11th, we also got this headline in the mainstream media, that the United States was supporting Ukraine, meaning it's opposing Russia. You see it? USA versus Russia, or USSR. Let's look at the name Russia in Pythagorean gematria. R becomes 9. It's the 18th letter. 1 plus 8 is 9. U is the 21st letter. 2 plus 1 becomes 3. S is the 19th. It reduces to 1. Another S, 1. There's supposed to be an I there. So that's what Russia looks like in letters to numbers. Still keeping these familiar numbers coded within. Remember, USSR was 3119. Still found within Russia. These are the trademarks of the Freemasons, of our occult rulers, who will continue to control and rule us according to numerology for as long as they're in power. One false narrative after another. And how do they do it? With their false media, their false schools, their courts, their legal system. There's a gigantic conspiracy on top of us. And until we wake up as a populace, it's going to continue. All right. Until next time.